Chapter 1. The Alpha King thought he rejected a weak Omega until she returned as his Luna. Lightning split the sky above the whispering pines, turning the ancient forest into a strobe-lit battlefield of shadows and silver rain. Alara Voss tasted blood where she'd bitten her lip, the metallic tang mixing with the storm's ozone as her sedan hydroplaned on the slick mountain road. She had left Shujabad 2 days ago, left the shattered engagement ring on the kitchen counter, left the voicemail from her ex-fiancé unanswered, left the woman she used to be in the rearview mirror. Blackthorn Hollow was supposed to be a hiding place, not a graveyard. The engine coughed, then died. No. Alara slammed her palms against the steering wheel. The wipers froze mid-swipe, leaving a smeared arc across the windshield. Rain hammered the roof like fists. She was still 20 miles from the rental cabin she'd booked under a fake name, and the cell signal had vanished an hour ago. A low growl rumbled outside, too deep for thunder, too close for comfort. Alara's breath fogged the glass. Through the downpour, 2 glowing eyes burned in the tree line, molten gold, unblinking. The shape behind them was massive, shoulders rolling like a predator pacing the edge of its territory. She fumbled for the pepper spray in the glove box, heart jackhammering against her ribs. The creature stepped into the headlight's dying beam. Not a bear. Not a wolf. Something between. Sleek black fur matted with rain, a muzzle too long, ears too high. It lowered its head, lips peeling back from teeth that caught the lightning like ivory blades. Alara's scream lodged in her throat. The beast lunged. Metal screamed as claws raked the driver's side door. The car rocked. Alara threw herself across the console, yanking the passenger lock just as the window shattered inward. Glass exploded over her lap. A paw the size of a dinner plate slammed through, inches from her face. Hot breath fogged the air, carrying the scent of pine needles and fresh blood. She swung the pepper spray. The stream hit the creature's eyes. It recoiled with a snarl that vibrated in her bones. Alara scrambled for the door handle, boots slipping on wet upholstery. She tumbled out into the mud, rain instantly plastering her hair to her face. Run! Her legs burned as she bolted into the forest, branches whipping her cheeks. Behind her, the growl became a roar, then silence. Too sudden, she risked a glance back. The beast was gone. Only the ruined car remained, headlights flickering like a dying heartbeat. Alara's lungs seized. She pressed her back to a pine trunk, sliding down until the needles bit her scalp. The storm swallowed every sound except her ragged breathing. She was alone. She was prey. A twig snapped to her left. She whirled, pepper spray raised, empty. The canister lay somewhere in the mud. Another snap closer. Alara's fingers clawed for the pocket knife on her keychain, the one her grandmother had pressed into her palm the day she left Shujabad. For the things that go bump in the dark, Betty. A man stepped from the shadows, tall, broad. Soaked black hair clung to a face carved from granite and stormlight. A scar sliced through his left eyebrow, pale against bronzed skin. Amber eyes, impossible, inhuman, locked on hers. He wore a dark Henley clinging to every hard line of muscle, sleeves shoved up to reveal forearms corded with old scars. Rain slid down his throat and disappeared beneath the collar. "Easy," he said, voice low, steady, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "I'm not here to hurt you." Alara's knife trembled between them. "Stay back." He raised both hands, palms open. Water streamed from his fingertips. "Name's Kale. Your car's done for. Something's hunting these woods tonight, and it's got your scent." Her laugh came out hysterical. "Something? You mean the monster that just tried to eat me?" Kale's jaw tightened. "Not a monster, a rogue. And it's not alone." His gaze flicked past her shoulder, nostrils flaring. "We need to move, now." Alara's knees buckled. The adrenaline crash hit like a freight train. Kale was there before she hit the ground, one arm banding around her waist, hauling her upright. His body was furnace hot against the storm's chill. She should have fought, should have screamed. Instead, she sagged, the knife clattering into the mud. "I've got you," he murmured, the words rumbling through his chest into hers. He smelled like cedar smoke and wild earth. Something inside her, something ancient and aching, unfurled at the sound of his voice. She hated it, needed it. Cale scooped her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Ilara's protest died when another howl split the night, closer, answering the first. He cursed under his breath and started running. Trees blurred. Rain stung her face. Cale moved like the forest belonged to him, boots barely touching the earth. Ilara clung to his shoulders, fingers digging into muscle that flexed and bunched beneath wet fabric. Every stride jarred her teeth, but his grip never faltered. Lightning revealed a cabin ahead, rough-hewn logs, a single chimney coughing smoke into the storm. Cale shouldered the door open and kicked it shut behind them. The world narrowed to firelight, the scent of burning pine, and the thud of her heartbeat in her ears. He set her on a bearskin rug before the hearth. The heat was immediate, searing after the freezing rain. Ilara's teeth chattered so hard she bit her tongue. Cale knelt, peeling off her sodden jacket with clinical efficiency. His hands were calloused, gentle, trembling faintly. "Stay with me," he said, voice rough. "Look at me, Ilara." She hadn't told him her name. Fear clawed up her throat again, but his eyes, those impossible amber eyes, held her captive. There was pain there, banked and ancient, and something else, recognition. "How do you know who I am?" she whispered. Cale's fingers stilled on the buttons of her shirt. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the storm's distant rage. Then he stood, putting distance between them. "Because," he said, turning to the flames, 10 years ago, I rejected you." The words hit harder than the lightning. Ilara's vision tunneled. She saw flashes, herself at 16, skinny and awkward, standing in the high school parking lot while a boy with the same scar sneered, "You're nothing. An Omega. Stay away from me." She'd buried the memory so deep it had scars of its own. "Cale," she breathed. The name tasted like rust. He flinched as if she'd struck him. "I was a kid. Cruel. I didn't know." He cut himself off, jaw working. "I didn't know what you'd become." Ilara laughed, the sound brittle. "And what am I now? Roadkill for your monster friends?" Cale whirled, eyes blazing. "You're alive. That's more than most." He crossed the room in 2 strides, dropping to his knees again. "Listen to me. The rogue that attacked you, it wasn't random. It was sent. Someone knows you're here and they want you dead before the full moon." Her stomach plummeted. "Why?" "Because you're the last Voss Omega," he said, voice raw. "And I'm the Alpha King who threw you away." Outside, thunder rolled like laughter. Inside, the fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Ilara stared at the man who'd once broken her heart with a single sentence, now kneeling at her feet like a penitent. The girl she'd been would have run. The woman she was now leaned forward, rain dripping from her lashes, and asked the only question that mattered. "What happens on the full moon, Cale?" His smile was sharp, feral, and utterly without hope. "You come into your power," he said, "and I either claim you as my Luna, or watch my pack tear you apart." Chapter 2. Shadows on the Road. The sedan fishtailed on the slick asphalt, tires spitting water as Ilara fought to keep control. Rain hammered the roof like gunfire, and the wipers struggled to clear the windshield. Cale sat beside her, a silent storm of his own, his broad shoulders tense, amber eyes scanning the darkness behind them. The air in the car was thick with the scent of wet leather, pine, and something primal that made Ilara's skin prickle. "How do you know my name?" she demanded again, her voice sharp despite the tremor in her hands. She stole a glance at him, catching the hard line of his jaw, the scar that cut through his brow like a lightning bolt. He was all edges, dangerous, unyielding, yet there was something in his gaze that felt protective. Cale didn't answer immediately. His fingers drummed against his thigh, a restless rhythm. "Your car," he said finally, nodding toward the dashboard. "Registration sticker, Ilara Voss, Blackthorn Hollow address." Her cheeks burned. Of course. She'd been paranoid for nothing. Or was she? The way he'd appeared out of nowhere, the growl she'd heard before his knock. It didn't add up. "And that thing back there?" She pressed, her voice rising. "What was it? A bear? A wolf?" "Worse," Cale muttered, his eyes narrowing at the rearview mirror. "Keep your eyes on the road." Ilara gripped the wheel tighter, her heart pounding. "I'm not moving another inch until you tell me what's going on." You don't just jump into someone's car in the middle of a storm and bark orders. Cale's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Bark, he repeated, the word laced with dark amusement. Cute. Don't dodge the question, she snapped, though her stomach flipped at the way his voice deepened, rough like gravel. What's chasing us? He leaned back, his gaze flicking to her again, assessing. You ever hear stories about these woods? Things that don't belong in the human world? Alara's breath hitched. She'd grown up on her grandmother's tales. Whispers of creatures in the blackthorn forest, of bloodlines and curses tied to the moon. She dismissed them as folklore, bedtime stories to scare kids. But the way Cale said it, with a weight that made the air feel heavier, sent a chill down her spine. You're saying, what, Bigfoot's after us? She said, trying to keep her voice light, but it cracked. Cale's eyes darkened. Not Bigfoot. Something older. Hungrier. He paused, then added, You shouldn't be out here alone, Alara. Not tonight. The way he said her name, low, deliberate, made her pulse stutter. She focused on the road, the yellow lines blurring in the rain. I can take care of myself, she said, though the lie tasted bitter. She was running, wasn't she? From a cheating fiancé, a shattered life, a version of herself she no longer recognized. Blackthorn Hollow was supposed to be a fresh start, a quiet town where she could rebuild. Not this. The car hit a pothole, jolting them both. Cale's hand shot out, steadying himself against the dashboard, his arm brushing hers. The contact was brief, but it burned, a spark that made her jerk away. He noticed, his eyes narrowing, but he said nothing. Turn left up ahead, he said, pointing to a dirt path barely visible through the trees. It's a shortcut to the hollow. Alara hesitated. The path looked like it led nowhere, swallowed by dense pines. That's not on any map. Trust me, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Trust him? She barely knew him, but the memory of those glowing eyes on the roadside, the growl that rattled her car, made her stomach twist. She turned onto the path, the car bouncing over roots and mud. Branches scraped the windows, clawing like fingers. Minutes stretched into silence, broken only by the storm and the creak of the suspension. Alara's nerves were frayed, her mind racing. Why are you helping me? She asked quietly. You don't know me. Kyle's gaze was fixed on the forest, his profile sharp against the dim glow of the dashboard. Maybe I know enough, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I've been waiting for someone like you. Her heart skipped. What's that supposed to mean? He didn't answer. The path widened, revealing a small clearing with a cabin nestled against a rocky outcrop. Its windows glowed faintly, a beacon in the storm. Alara's foot eased off the gas. This your place? For now, Cale said. Pull in. We need to wait this out. We? Alara's voice was sharp again. I'm not staying with you. I have a rental in town. You won't make it to town tonight. He cut in, his tone final. Not with what's out there. She wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the exhaustion in her bones and the fear gnawing at her gut won out. She parked beside the cabin, the engine ticking as it cooled. Cale was out before she could blink, circling to her door and pulling it open. Rain soaked him instantly, but he didn't flinch. Inside, he said, offering a hand. Alara ignored it, climbing out on her own. The cold bit into her, her thin jacket no match for the storm. Cale's hand hovered at her back, guiding her toward the cabin without touching her. The door creaked open, revealing a sparse but warm interior. Wooden floors, a stone fireplace, a single couch piled with furs. It smelled of cedar and smoke, and the heat from the fire was a balm against her chilled skin. Sit, Cale said, nodding toward the couch. He disappeared into a side room, returning with a towel and a flannel shirt. Dry off. You're shaking. I'm fine, Alara lied, but her teeth chattered as she took the towel. She dried her hair, watching him warily as he stoked the fire. His movements were precise, economical, but there was a restlessness in him, like a predator pacing a cage. Who are you, Cale? She asked, wrapping the flannel around her shoulders. It was too big, smelling of him. Pine, musk, and something indefinably wild. He paused, his back to her, the firelight casting shadows across his frame. Someone who's trying to keep you alive, he said, his voice low. That's all you need to know for now. That's not enough, she said, stepping closer. You know my name, where I'm going, and you're dodging every question. What aren't you telling me? Cale turned, his eyes catching the fire's glow, and for a moment they seemed to burn. You're not ready for the truth, Alara. Not yet. Her breath caught at the intensity in his voice, the way it seemed to pull at something deep inside her. She should be terrified, should run back to her car and take her chances with the storm. But there was something about him, something that made her stay, made her want to unravel the mystery of the man standing before her. A howl split the night, long and mournful, echoing through the forest. Alara's blood ran cold. Cale's head snapped toward the window, his body going rigid. Stay here, he growled, moving toward the door. Wait. She grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into the hard muscle. You're not going out there. I have to, he said, his voice rough with something that sounded like pain. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. Before she could protest, he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him. Alara stood frozen, her heart hammering. She rushed to the door, peering through the small window. Cale's silhouette vanished into the trees, swallowed by the storm. Another howl, closer this time. Alara's hand flew to the lock, clicking it into place. She backed away, her eyes darting to the windows, the shadows beyond. What had she stumbled into? And why did she feel, deep in her bones, that Cale was the only thing standing between her and something unspeakable? The fire crackled, casting flickering light across the room. Alara sank onto the couch, pulling the furs around her. Her mind raced. But beneath the fear, a spark of something else burned. Curiosity, maybe. Or the pull of a connection she couldn't name. Cale was hiding something big, and she was determined to find out what. Outside, the storm raged on, and the forest held its secrets close. Chapter 3, Embers of a Broken Bond. The fire hissed as a log collapsed, sending a spray of sparks up the chimney. Alara sat rigid on the bearskin rug, knees drawn to her chest, Cale's flannel shirt swallowing her frame. The cabin's warmth did little to thaw the ice in her veins. 10 years? 10 years since Cale had looked at her like she was dirt beneath his boots, since the word Omega had been spat like a curse. And now he knelt before her, the Alpha King of some hidden world, claiming she was the key to everything. You're lying, she said, her voice barely above the crackle of the flames. I'm human. I've always been human. Cale's amber eyes didn't waver. He stayed on his knees, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, but not touching. You're half right, he said. You were raised human, hidden. Your grandmother saw to that. Alara's breath caught. Nana Mira, with her cryptic stories of moonlit curses and bloodlines that sang to the stars. Alara had loved the tales as a child, dismissed them as an adult. She was just eccentric, she said, but the words felt hollow. Cale's lips pressed into a thin line. She was protecting you. The Voss line carries the old blood. Omega, but not weak. Rare. The kind that binds packs, breaks curses, or starts wars. He paused, his gaze dropping to her trembling hands. The kind that makes alphas do stupid things. Like reject a 16-year-old girl in a parking lot? Alara's voice cracked, the old wound splitting open. She hated how small it made her feel, how the memory still stung. You humiliated me, Cale. You made me feel like nothing. His jaw clenched, and for the first time he looked away, the firelight carving shadows across his scar. I was 17, arrogant. My father had just died, and the pack was tearing itself apart. I was told Omegas were a liability, that you'd weaken me. His voice roughened. I believed them. I was wrong. The confession hung between them, heavy as the storm outside. Alara wanted to scream, to throw his apology back in his face, but the raw pain in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't the cocky boy she remembered. This was a man carrying scars deeper than the one on his brow. Why now? She asked, her voice steadier. Why tell me this after 10 years? Cale rose, pacing to the window. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the forest beyond. Because the full moon's in 3 days, he said, his back to her. Your 26th birthday. The Vos Omega awakens then, whether you want it or not. And when it does, every pack within 100 miles will feel it, including the rogues who attacked you. Alara's stomach twisted. Rogues? Shifters without a pack, he said, turning to face her. Some are born that way. Others are exiled. They're drawn to power, to bloodlines like yours. If they claim you before I do... He didn't finish, but the implication chilled her more than the storm. Claim me? She stood, the flannel slipping off one shoulder. I'm not a prize, Cale. I'm not some magical battery for your pack. His eyes flared, and he crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping just short of touching her. You think I want this? His voice was low, urgent. I've spent 10 years trying to forget you, Alara, trying to outrun the mistake I made. But the bond, it's not just lore. It's real. I felt it then, and I feel it now, tearing me apart. Her pulse thundered. Bond. The word stirred something deep inside her, a pull she'd felt the moment he'd carried her through the storm. She took a step back, her calves hitting the couch. I don't feel anything, she lied. Cale's gaze softened, but there was a predator's edge to it. You're lying. I can hear your heart racing. I can smell your fear. And something else. He inhaled sharply, his eyes half closing. You're fighting it, but it's there. Alara's cheeks burned. She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. You don't get to do this, she said. You don't get to waltz back into my life, throw around words like bond and omega, and expect me to just fall in line. I don't expect that, he said quietly. I'm asking you to trust me. Just for tonight. Let me keep you safe until the storm passes. Then you can decide what you want. She glanced at him, his silhouette framed by the fire. He looked exhausted, the weight of his words etched into every line of his face. Against her better judgment, she nodded. Fine, one night. Relief flickered across his features, gone as quickly as it came. He moved to a small kitchen nook, pulling a kettle from a shelf. Tea, he said. Chamomile. It'll help with the shock. Alara watched him work, his movements precise despite his size. The cabin was sparse but lived in. Books stacked on a shelf, a worn axe by the door, a map of the forest pinned to the wall with red marks circling Blackthorn Hollow. Questions burned on her tongue, but exhaustion weighed her down. She sank onto the couch, pulling a fur blanket over her legs. Kyle returned with 2 steaming mugs, handing her one before settling on the floor across from her, his back against the hearth. The distance felt deliberate, like he was giving her space to breathe. They sipped in silence, the tea's warmth easing the knot in her chest. Tell me about the pack, she said finally, needing to fill the quiet. What's it like? Cale's fingers tightened around his mug. Old fractured. My father united the clans under one banner, but after he died, the alliances crumbled. I've been holding it together with blood and teeth. He glanced at her, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Not the fairy tale you're imagining. And the rogues? She pressed. Why do they want me? His smile faded. Power. An omega like you can tip the scales. Bonded to an alpha, you'd strengthen the pack, heal old wounds. Unclaimed, you're a weapon anyone can wield. He set his mug down, leaning forward. I won't let that happen, Alara. Not to you. The fierceness in his voice sent a shiver through her. She wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile thing, especially with a man who'd once broken her. And if I say no? She asked. If I walk away after tonight? Cale's eyes darkened. Then I'll protect you anyway, from a distance. But the bond won't let me go, and it won't let you go either. Not forever. Her breath hitched. She set her mug on the floor, her hands trembling. I need air, she said, standing abruptly. Alara. Cale reached for her, but she shook her head. I just need a minute. She moved to the door, ignoring his protest. The storm had eased to a steady drizzle, the air cool and sharp. She stepped onto the porch, the wooden planks creaking under her boots. The forest was a wall of shadows, but the howls were gone, replaced by the drip of water from the pines. Cale followed, keeping a few paces back. You shouldn't be out here alone. I'm not alone, she said, her voice softer now. She turned to face him, the porch light casting his face in stark relief. You're here, And I don't know what to do with that. He stepped closer, slow, like he was approaching a spooked animal. You don't have to do anything tonight. Just let me be here. Let me try to make up for what I did. Ilara's throat tightened. She wanted to hate him, to hold on to the anger that had kept her moving forward all these years. But standing here, with the forest whispering around them, and the bond humming in her blood, she felt the first crack in her defenses. I don't forgive you, she said, her voice barely audible. I know, he replied, his eyes never leaving hers, but let me earn it. A rustle in the trees made them both freeze. Cale's head snapped toward the sound, his body tensing. Inside, he growled, his hand on her arm, guiding her back. What was that? She whispered, her heart racing again. Scout, he said, his voice low. They're closer than I thought. He locked the door behind them, his movements swift, predatory. Ilara's pulse thundered as he grabbed the axe from beside the door, his eyes scanning the windows. Stay by the fire, he said. Don't move. Cale. Her voice broke. He turned, cupping her face in one rough hand, his thumb brushing her cheek. I won't let them touch you, he said, the promise fierce and unshakable. Not ever. Then he was gone, slipping out a back door into the night. Ilara stood frozen, his touch burning on her skin, the bond pulling tighter with every heartbeat. Outside, the forest held its breath, and somewhere in the dark, danger circled closer. Chapter 4: Whispers in the Dark. Ilara's back pressed against the cabin wall, the rough-hewn logs biting into her shoulders through Cale's oversized flannel. The fire had settled into a low, steady glow, casting long shadows that danced like specters across the floorboards. Every creak of the cabin, every drip of rain from the eaves set her nerves alight. Cale had been gone for nearly 20 minutes, and the silence was louder than the storm. She clutched the axe he'd left behind, its weight foreign in her hands. The blade gleamed in the firelight, sharp enough to split bone. Ilara's fingers tightened around the handle, her knuckles whitening. She wasn't helpless. She'd survived a cheating fiancé, a cross-country move, and a monster in the woods tonight. But the uncertainty of what waited outside made her feel like that 16-year-old girl again. Small and exposed. A soft thud against the back door made her jump, the axe nearly slipping from her grip. She raised it, heart hammering as the door creaked open. Cale stepped inside, rain dripping from his hair, his Henley torn at the sleeve. A streak of blood, dark, almost black, marred his forearm, but he moved like it was nothing. You're hurt, Ilara said, lowering the axe but not letting it go. It's not mine, Cale said, his voice low, edged with something feral. He locked the door behind him, his eyes scanning the room before settling on her. Scout's gone. For now. Gone? She stepped closer, her gaze flicking to the blood. What did you do? Cale's jaw tightened. He crossed to the sink, grabbing a cloth and running it under water. What I had to. He was marking territory, leaving a trail for the others. I stopped him. He didn't look at her as he scrubbed the blood from his skin, the motion methodical but tense. Ilara's stomach churned. Stopped him? How? He paused, the cloth dripping pink into the basin. You don't want the details, Ilara. I do, she said, her voice sharper than she intended. If I'm in this deep, I deserve to know what's out there. What you are. Kyle turned, his amber eyes catching the firelight, and for a moment, she saw something flicker in them. Guilt, maybe, or fear. He tossed the cloth aside and crossed the room, stopping just out of reach. I'm a shifter, he said, the words heavy, deliberate. Werewolf, if you want the old term, born to it. Alpha of the Blackthorn Pack. The confession should have shocked her, should have sent her running for the door, but after the creature in the woods, after the howls and Cale's impossible strength, it felt inevitable. Still, her voice trembled. Show me. His brows shot up, surprise breaking through his guarded expression. You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking for the truth, she said, stepping closer, the axe still in her hands but lowered now. You say I'm part of this world, that I'm some Omega. If I'm going to trust you, I need to see it. All of it. Cale's gaze searched hers, intense and unyielding. It's not safe, he said. Not tonight. The moon's waxing and He trailed off, his hands clenching at his sides. I'm not always in control. Alara's heart pounded, but she didn't back down. Then why are you here, Kyle? Why risk it? Because of you, he said, the words raw, like they'd been torn from him. The bond, it's stronger than the moon, stronger than me. I can't leave you, even if I should. Her breath caught. The air between them crackled, charged with something she couldn't name but felt in every nerve. She set the axe against the wall, her hands freer but no less unsteady. Then don't hide from me, she said softly. Not anymore. Cale's eyes darkened, and he took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the rain and pine clinging to his skin. You don't know what you're stirring, Alara, he murmured. If I shift, if I let the wolf out, it'll want more than your trust. Her pulse thrummed in her throat. I'm not asking for the wolf, she said, holding his gaze. I'm asking for you. For a moment he was still, the tension in his frame taut as a bowstring. Then he exhaled, a shaky sound, and turned away, running a hand through his wet hair. Not tonight, he said, his voice rough, but soon. I promise. Alara nodded, disappointment and relief warring in her chest. She moved to the couch, sinking into the furs, her body aching from the night's ordeal. Cale grabbed a first aid kit from a shelf and knelt before her, his hands gentle as he checked the cuts on her palms from the glass in the car. His touch was careful, almost reverent, and it sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire. You don't have to do this, she said, watching his fingers work, tying a bandage with practiced ease. I do, he said, not looking up. I owe you more than this, but it's a start. The sincerity in his voice chipped away at the walls she'd built around her heart. She studied him, the scar on his brow, the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes. What's it like? She asked quietly. Being what you are. Kyle paused, his hands stilling. It's freedom, he said finally. And a cage. The wolf wants to run, to hunt, to protect what's ours, but the man has to keep it in check, or it takes over. He met her eyes, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Most days I'm not sure who's winning. And the bond? She pressed, her voice barely above a whisper. What does it feel like for you? His smile faded and he leaned closer, his voice low, intimate, like I've been missing half my soul for 10 years. Like every step I took away from you carved something out of me. And now you're here. And it's trying to pull me back together, whether I deserve it or not. Alara's throat tightened. She wanted to pull away, to protect the fragile pieces of herself she'd rebuilt after he'd shattered her. But the pull he described, she felt it too, a thread tugging at her heart, urging her closer. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted. Trust you. Be what you say I am. Cale's hand hovered near hers, not touching but close enough to feel the warmth. You don't have to decide tonight, he said. Just let me stay close. Let me keep you safe until you do. She nodded, the weight of the night pressing down on her. Cale stood, grabbing a blanket from a chest and draping it over her shoulders. He settled on the floor again, his back against the couch, close enough that she could reach out and touch him if she wanted. She didn't, not yet. Sleep, he said, his voice soft but firm. I'll keep watch. Alara's eyes grew heavy, the fire's warmth and the rhythm of his breathing lulling her. But as she drifted toward sleep, a question lingered, sharp and insistent. If Cale was the Alpha King, why was he alone in this cabin? Why did he look like a man carrying a war on his shoulders? Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle, and the forest was quiet. Too quiet, Cale's head tilted, his eyes narrowing at the window. He rose silently, moving to the door, his body coiled with tension. Alara stirred, sensing the shift in the air. Kyle? She mumbled, half asleep. Go back to sleep, he said, but his voice was tight, his hand on the door handle. It's nothing, but it wasn't nothing. A faint scent, musky, wrong, slipped through the cracks around the door. Cale's nostrils flared, and his eyes glowed faintly in the dark, a predator's gleam. He glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. Lock this behind me, he said, tossing her a key from his pocket. Don't open it. Not for anyone. Cale, wait, She was fully awake now, scrambling to her feet. He was already gone, the door clicking shut. Alara rushed to lock it, her hands shaking. She pressed her ear to the wood, straining to hear. Nothing but the drip of rain and the faint rustle of leaves. Then, a low growl. Not Kale's, but something else. Something closer. Alara's blood ran cold. She backed away, her eyes darting to the windows, the shadows beyond. Kale had promised to protect her, but as the growl grew louder, joined by another, she realized the night was far from over. And whatever was out there wasn't just hunting her. It was hunting him. Chapter 5. Blood on the Threshold. Ilara's bare feet stuck to the cold floorboards as she backed away from the door, the key biting into her palm. The growls outside had multiplied. 3, maybe 4 distinct voices weaving through the trees like smoke. They weren't the mournful howls of earlier. These were guttural, hungry, laced with a challenge that vibrated in her teeth. The cabin felt suddenly flimsy, a matchstick box against a hurricane. She snatched the axe again, the weight grounding her. The fire had burned low, casting the room in bruised orange and deep shadow. Every flicker of light on the window panes looked like eyes. She forced herself to breathe through her nose, counting heartbeats the way her therapist had taught her after the breakup. 1, 2, 3, in. 1, 2, 3, out. But the air tasted of iron and pine and something feral. A sharp crack split the night. Wood splintering. The back wall shuddered as something heavy slammed against it. Alara spun, axe raised. Dust sifted from the rafters. Another impact, lower this time, and the door frame groaned. She could hear claws scraping, deliberate, testing. "Kale!" Her voice cracked like a whip in the small space. No answer. The front door rattled in its frame, hinges screaming. Alara's gaze darted to the iron poker by the hearth. She wedged it through the door handles, a makeshift bar, then dragged the heavy oak table across the floor, muscles burning. The legs screeched. She shoved it against the door, wedging it tight. Silence fell. Thick. Suffocating. Then a whisper, so soft she almost missed it. Ilara. Not Kale's voice. Higher, melodic, laced with something that made her skin crawl. It came from the window to her left. She turned slowly. A woman stood outside the glass, rain-soaked hair plastered to a face too perfect to be human, cheekbones sharp as glass, eyes the color of frostbite. She smiled, and her teeth were too many, too pointed. "Open the door, little Omega," the woman crooned, her voice sliding under Alara's skin like ice water. "He can't save you. Not from us." Alara's grip on the axe handle slicked with sweat. "Stay back." The woman tilted her head, rain dripping from her lashes. "You smell like him. Like, mate." Her tongue traced her lower lip. "He's been hiding you. Naughty Alpha." A crash from the back of the cabin. Alara whirled as the rear door exploded inward, shards of wood flying. A massive gray wolf barreled through, shoulders rolling, eyes glowing crimson. It locked onto her instantly, lips peeling back from fangs longer than her fingers. Alara swung the axe. The blade caught the wolf mid-lunge, burying into its shoulder with a wet crunch. Hot blood sprayed across her face, metallic and thick. The beast yelped, twisting, and the axe was wrenched from her grasp, still lodged in flesh. It crashed into the table, splintering wood, and rounded on her with a snarl that rattled her bones. She stumbled back, heel catching on the rug. The wolf advanced, limping but relentless, blood dripping in fat drops onto the floorboards. Alara's hand found the poker. She yanked it free and brandished it like a sword. "Come on, then," she hissed, voice shaking but steadying. "Come on!" The wolf lunged. A blur of black fur and muscle crashed through the side window. Kyle. He hit the gray wolf like a freight train, jaws clamping around its throat. The impact sent them both rolling across the floor in a tangle of snarls and blood. Alara scrambled back as they slammed into the hearth, embers exploding in a shower of sparks. Kale shifted mid-fight. No slow transformation, no cinematic glow. One heartbeat he was man, the next a massive black wolf, larger than the gray, eyes blazing gold. His claws raked the intruder's flank, tearing muscle. The gray wolf thrashed, jaws snapping. But Cale was faster, deadlier. He pinned it, teeth sinking deep. A wet crunch, and the gray went limp. Cale shifted back as suddenly as he'd changed, rising naked and streaked with blood, chest heaving. His eyes found Alara across the carnage. "Are you hurt?" She couldn't speak. The poker trembled in her hands. Cale crossed the room in 2 strides, gently prying the iron from her fingers. His hands were slick with blood, but his touch was careful as he turned her palms up, checking for wounds. "I'm okay," she managed, voice hoarse. You shifted." "I told you I would," he said, but there was no triumph in it, only exhaustion. His gaze flicked to the broken door, the dead wolf, the woman who had vanished from the window. "They're not done. We have to move." Alara stared at the corpse. Its fur was already receding, bones cracking and reshaping with sickening pops. In seconds, a man lay there, mid-30s, tattooed, throat torn open. Human. Her stomach lurched. Cale grabbed a blanket from the couch, wrapping it around his hips. "Alara, look at me." She did. His eyes were still gold, pupils blown wide. "I need you to listen. There's a safe room under the floorboards, trapdoor by the bookcase. You're going down there now." "No." The word came out stronger than she felt. "I'm not hiding while you fight alone." His jaw clenched. "This isn't a discussion." "It is," she cut in, stepping over the blood pooling on the floor. "You said I'm part of this. Then treat me like it. I just killed a wolf with an axe, Kyle. I'm not fragile." Something flickered in his eyes. Pride, maybe, or fear. He opened his mouth to argue, but a low growl from outside silenced him. More shadows moved beyond the shattered windows, circling. Kyle cursed under his breath. "Fine, but you stay behind me. And you run when I say run." He moved to the bookcase, yanking it aside to reveal a heavy iron ring in the floor. He lifted the trapdoor, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air that wafted up was cool, damp, smelling of earth and old stone. "After you," he said, grabbing a shotgun from a rack on the wall and tossing her a flashlight. Alara hesitated, then descended. The stairs creaked under her weight, the darkness swallowing her step by step. Cale followed, pulling the trapdoor shut above them. The click of a latch echoed like a gunshot. The safe room was small, reinforced with steel beams, shelves lined with canned food, water, medical supplies. A single bulb flickered on when Cale flipped a switch. He set the shotgun down and turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said quietly. "I needed to." She leaned against the wall, the adrenaline crash hitting hard. Her legs shook. "That woman at the window, she knew you. Said you were hiding me?" Cale's face darkened. "Lyrian, she's complicated. X?" The word slipped out before she could stop it. He barked a humorless laugh. "No, sister to the alpha I killed to take the throne. She's been gunning for my blood since I was 19. He ran a hand over his face, smearing blood. "She thinks if she delivers you to the rogue council, they'll crown her queen." Alara's stomach twisted. "So I'm bait." "Your leverage," he corrected, stepping closer. "But not for long. Once the full moon hits, once you awaken, stop." She held up a hand. "Stop talking about me like I'm a weapon. I'm a person, Kyle. I have a life, a job. A cat named Pickles waiting in Shujabad." His eyes softened. "I know, do you?" She pushed off the wall, closing the distance between them. "Because it feels like everyone wants a piece of me, and I don't even know who I am in this." Cale's hand rose, hesitating before cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed a streak of blood from her skin. "You're Alara Voss," he said, voice low. "The girl who used to draw constellations on her notebooks. The woman who drove across the country to start over. The Omega who just faced down a shifter with an axe and didn't flinch." Her breath hitched. "You remember the constellations?" "I remember everything," his voice cracked. "I've been running from it for 10 years, but I never forgot." The air between them thickened, charged with unsaid words. Alara's hand rose, fingers brushing the scar on his brow. "How'd you get this?" "Training accident," he said. "My father. He believed pain built character." She traced the jagged line, gentle. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." His eyes closed at her touch. "Some scars remind us we survived." A tremor ran through the floor above. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Cale's eyes snapped open, gold bleeding into the irises. He grabbed the shotgun, motioning her behind a metal crate. "Stay low," he whispered. "No matter what you hear, don't come up." Elara nodded, crouching, her heart in her throat. Cale moved to the ladder, every muscle coiled. The trapdoor rattled. Once, twice, then silence. Cale's head tilted, listening. Minutes stretched. Finally he exhaled, lowering the gun. "They're gone. For now." He helped her up, his hands lingering on her arms. "We can't stay here," he said. "Lyrian knows this place. There's a bunker 10 miles north, old pack stronghold. We leave at dawn." Elara nodded, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Kyle grabbed a first aid kit, cleaning the cut on her forearm she hadn't noticed. His touch was steady, reverent. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice small. "I know." He tied the bandage, then pressed his forehead to hers. "But you're not alone. Not anymore." Above them, the cabin creaked in the wind, blood drying on the floorboards. Below, in the dim bulb's glow, 2 broken souls stood on the edge of something irreversible. Trust, fate, or the fragile beginning of forgiveness. Chapter 6. The Weight of Dawn. The safe room's single bulb buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow across the concrete walls. Elara sat on a metal crate, knees pulled to her chest, Cale's blanket still wrapped around her shoulders like a shield. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, gun oil, and the faint copper tang of blood that clung to them both. Cale stood by the ladder, shotgun propped against his thigh, his eyes fixed on the trapdoor above. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water from a pipe in the corner. Elara's fingers traced the edge of the bandage on her arm. Cale's careful knots a reminder of his gentleness amid the chaos. Her mind replayed the fight. The gray wolf's crimson eyes, the way Cale's body had blurred from man to beast, the woman at the window with her chilling smile. Lyrian. The name felt like a splinter under her skin. "You're thinking loud enough to wake the dead," Kyle said, his voice low, pulling her from her thoughts. He hadn't moved, but his gaze flicked to her, soft despite the hard set of his jaw. "I'm trying to make sense of this," she said, her voice hoarse. "Wolves, alphas, omegas, a sister who wants you dead and me. What, kidnapped? It's a lot, Cale." He nodded, setting the shotgun down and crossing the small space to crouch in front of her. His knees cracked and he winced, a reminder that even an alpha wasn't immune to fatigue. "I know," he said. "I've had years to wrap my head around it, and I still don't have answers for everything." Elara studied him, the lines of exhaustion etched deeper in the dim light. His hair was still damp, curling at the ends, and a bruise bloomed along his collarbone where the gray wolf had landed a blow. "You're hurt," she said, reaching out instinctively. Her fingers hovered over the bruise, then pulled back. "It's nothing," he said. But his voice was rough, like he was holding something back. "Shifters heal fast. By dawn, it'll be gone." She wanted to argue, to insist he let her help, but the weight of his words stopped her. By dawn. They had to move, to reach this bunker before Lyrian and her rogues came back. The thought sent a shiver through her, and she pulled the blanket tighter. "Tell me about the bunker," she said, needing to focus on something concrete. "What's it like?" Cale leaned back on his heels, his eyes distant. "Old, built during the Pack Wars, maybe a century ago. Stone walls, iron doors, hidden in a ravine. My father used it as a last resort when rival clans got too close." He paused, a shadow crossing his face. "I haven't been there since I was a kid. Not since he died." Elara's chest tightened. She heard the pain in his voice, the same ache she'd felt when he'd mentioned his father before. "What happened to him?" she asked softly. Cale's gaze dropped to the floor. He was challenged. Another alpha Draven wanted the throne. They fought under a blood moon. My father was stronger, but Draven played dirty. Poisoned claws, a blade in the dark. His hands clenched into fists. I was 15, too young to challenge, too weak to stop it. I watched him die. The raw grief in his voice cut through her. She reached out, her hand resting on his knee. "I'm sorry," she said, the words feeling small but necessary. He looked at her hand, then at her, his eyes searching. I swore I'd never let the pack fall like that again. That's why I became Alpha. Why I've fought so hard to hold it together. His voice dropped. And why I can't lose you, Alara. Not when you're the one thing that could save us. Her breath caught. Save you? Kale, I'm not— You are, he said, his voice fierce but gentle. The Vos Omega isn't just power. It's balance. You could heal the fractures in the pack, bind us together. But more than that, he hesitated, his hand covering hers, warm and calloused. You could heal me. The confession hung between them, fragile and heavy. Ilara's heart pounded, the bond he kept mentioning pulsing in her chest like a second heartbeat. She wanted to pull away, to protect herself from the intensity of him, but her hand stayed under his, grounded by his touch. I don't know how to be what you need, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm just me. I'm scared, Kale. Of the rogues, of the full moon, of whatever this bond is. He squeezed her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. I'm scared too, he said, the admission surprising her. I've spent 10 years trying to be the alpha my pack needs, strong, unbreakable. But with you, I'm just Kale, the idiot who hurt you and never stopped regretting it. Ilara's throat tightened. She saw the boy he'd been in the man before her, the one who'd lashed out to protect himself, now carrying the weight of a kingdom. You're not that boy anymore, she said, her voice steadying. But I need time to see who you are now. He nodded, his eyes soft. You'll have it. As much as we can steal before the moon rises. A faint thud overhead made them both freeze. Kale was on his feet in an instant, shotgun in hand, his body shielding hers. He tilted his head, listening. Another thud, then a scrape like claws on wood. Ilara's pulse raced, but Kale's presence anchored her. They're testing the trap door, he whispered. They can't get in, but they'll wait us out. How long until dawn? She asked, her voice trembling. He glanced at a watch on his wrist, the face cracked but ticking. 3 hours. We'll move then, under cover of the storm's aftermath. They'll expect us to stay put. Ilara nodded, her mind racing. She stood, the blanket slipping to the floor. What do we need? Kale's eyes flicked to her, a spark of approval in them. You're not arguing this time. I'm done hiding, she said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. If I'm part of this, I'm in it. His smile was small but genuine, warming something inside her. He moved to a shelf, pulling down a backpack and stuffing it with supplies. Water, a knife, a flare gun. He handed her a leather jacket, smaller than his, worn but sturdy. Found this in the cabin, he said. Belonged to my mother. It'll fit. Ilara slipped it on, the leather cool against her skin, smelling faintly of lavender and smoke. It felt like armor, a piece of Kale's past wrapping around her. Thank you, she said, meeting his eyes. He nodded, then pulled a small silver amulet from his pocket, a crescent moon etched with runes. He pressed it into her hand. For protection, he said. Old pack magic. It won't stop a rogue, but it'll mask your scent for a while. She closed her fingers around it, the metal warm from his touch. And you? She asked. What protects you? His gaze softened. You do, the words stole her breath. Before she could respond, he turned to the shelves, grabbing a map and spreading it on the crate. Here's the ravine, he said, pointing to a red X. 10 miles north through the densest part of the forest. We'll stick to the creek bed to cover our tracks. Ilara leaned over the map, her shoulder brushing his. The contact sent a jolt through her, the bond humming in her blood. She ignored it, focusing on the route. What about Lyrian? She asked. Will she follow? She will, Cal said, his voice grim. But she's not the worst of it. Draven's son, Torin, leads the rogues now. He's got my father's ambition and none of his honor. If he finds you— He didn't finish, but his hand tightened on the map. Ilara's stomach knotted. Then we don't let him. Kyle looked at her, surprise and something deeper flickering in his eyes. You're starting to sound like a Luna, he said, his voice low. She flushed, turning back to the map. Don't get ahead of yourself, he chuckled, the sound easing the tension in the room. They spent the next hour planning, their heads bent close, voices low. Every brush of his arm, every shared glance, deepened the thread between them, pulling tighter with every word. As the first hint of gray light seeped through the cracks around the trapdoor, Kel stood, slinging the backpack over his shoulder. "It's time," he said, offering his hand. Alara took it, her fingers curling around his. His grip was warm, steady, a lifeline in the dark. They climbed the ladder, Cale first, shotgun ready. The cabin above was a wreck, bloodstains, splintered wood, the gray wolf's body gone, dragged away by its pack. The air was heavy with their scent, but the forest outside was quiet. Cale opened the door, scanning the trees. "Clear," he whispered, pulling her into the dawn's pale light. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and the ground slick with mud. Alara's boots sank into the earth as they moved, Cale's hand never leaving hers. Behind them, the cabin stood silent, a ruined sanctuary. Ahead, the forest loomed, hiding the bunker and whatever waited beyond. Alara's heart pounded, but with Kyle beside her, the fear felt shared, not crushing. As they slipped into the trees, a faint howl rose in the distance. Not close, but close enough. Cale's grip tightened, and Alara squeezed back. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Chapter 6. The Weight of Dawn. The safe room's single bulb buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow across the concrete walls. Alara sat on a metal crate, knees pulled to her chest, Cale's blanket still wrapped around her shoulders like a shield. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, gun oil, and the faint copper tang of blood that clung to them both. Cale stood by the ladder, shotgun propped against his thigh, his eyes fixed on the trapdoor above. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water from a pipe in the corner. Alara's fingers traced the edge of the bandage on her arm. Cale's careful knots a reminder of his gentleness amid the chaos. Her mind replayed the fight. The gray wolf's crimson eyes, the way Cale's body had blurred from man to beast, the woman at the window with her chilling smile. Lyrian. The name felt like a splinter under her skin. "You're thinking loud enough to wake the dead," Kyle said, his voice low, pulling her from her thoughts. He hadn't moved, but his gaze flicked to her, soft despite the hard set of his jaw. "I'm trying to make sense of this," she said, her voice hoarse. "Wolves, alphas, omegas, a sister who wants you dead and me. What, kidnapped? It's a lot, Cale." He nodded, setting the shotgun down and crossing the small space to crouch in front of her. His knees cracked and he winced, a reminder that even an alpha wasn't immune to fatigue. "I know," he said. "I've had years to wrap my head around it, and I still don't have answers for everything." Alara studied him, the lines of exhaustion etched deeper in the dim light. His hair was still damp, curling at the ends, and a bruise bloomed along his collarbone where the gray wolf had landed a blow. "You're hurt," she said, reaching out instinctively. Her fingers hovered over the bruise, then pulled back. "It's nothing," he said. But his voice was rough, like he was holding something back. "Shifters heal fast. By dawn, it'll be gone." She wanted to argue, to insist he let her help, but the weight of his words stopped her. By dawn. They had to move, to reach this bunker before Lyrian and her rogues came back. The thought sent a shiver through her, and she pulled the blanket tighter. "Tell me about the bunker," she said, needing to focus on something concrete. "What's it like?" Cale leaned back on his heels, his eyes distant. "Old, built during the Pack Wars maybe a century ago. Stone walls, iron doors, hidden in a ravine. My father used it as a last resort when rival clans got too close." He paused, a shadow crossing his face. "I haven't been there since I was a kid. Not since he died." Alara's chest tightened. She heard the pain in his voice, the same ache she'd felt when he'd mentioned his father before. "What happened to him?" she asked softly. Cale's gaze dropped to the floor. He was challenged. Another alpha Draven wanted the throne. They fought under a blood moon. My father was stronger, but Draven played dirty. Poisoned claws, a blade in the dark. His hands clenched into fists. I was 15, too young to challenge, too weak to stop it. I watched him die. The raw grief in his voice cut through her. She reached out, her hand resting on his knee. "I'm sorry," she said, the words feeling small but necessary. He looked at her hand, then at her, his eyes searching. "I swore I'd never let the pack fall like that again. That's why I became Alpha, why I've fought so hard to hold it together." His voice dropped. "And why I can't lose you, Alara. Not when you're the one thing that could save us." Her breath caught. "Save you?" "Kale, I'm not—" "You are," he said, his voice fierce but gentle. "The Vos Omega isn't just power. It's balance. You could heal the fractures in the pack, bind us together. But more than that—" He hesitated, his hand covering hers, warm and calloused. "You could heal me." The confession hung between them, fragile and heavy. Ilara's heart pounded, the bond he kept mentioning pulsing in her chest like a second heartbeat. She wanted to pull away, to protect herself from the intensity of him, but her hand stayed under his, grounded by his touch. "I don't know how to be what you need," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just me. I'm scared, Kale. Of the rogues, of the full moon, of whatever this bond is." He squeezed her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "I'm scared too," he said, the admission surprising her. "I've spent 10 years trying to be the alpha my pack needs, strong, unbreakable. But with you, I'm just Kale, the idiot who hurt you and never stopped regretting it." Ilara's throat tightened. She saw the boy he'd been in the man before her, the one who'd lashed out to protect himself, now carrying the weight of a kingdom. "You're not that boy anymore," she said, her voice steadying. "But I need time to see who you are now." He nodded, his eyes soft. "You'll have it. As much as we can steal before the moon rises." A faint thud overhead made them both freeze. Kale was on his feet in an instant, shotgun in hand, his body shielding hers. He tilted his head, listening. Another thud, then a scrape like claws on wood. Ilara's pulse raced, but Kale's presence anchored her. "They're testing the trap door," he whispered. "They can't get in, but they'll wait us out." "How long until dawn?" she asked, her voice trembling. He glanced at a watch on his wrist, the face cracked but ticking. 3 hours. We'll move then, under cover of the storm's aftermath. They'll expect us to stay put." Ilara nodded, her mind racing. She stood, the blanket slipping to the floor. "What do we need?" Kale's eyes flicked to her, a spark of approval in them. "You're not arguing this time." "I'm done hiding," she said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "If I'm part of this, I'm in it." His smile was small but genuine, warming something inside her. He moved to a shelf, pulling down a backpack and stuffing it with supplies. Water, a knife, a flare gun. He handed her a leather jacket, smaller than his, worn but sturdy. "Found this in the cabin," he said. "Belonged to my mother. It'll fit." Ilara slipped it on, the leather cool against her skin, smelling faintly of lavender and smoke. It felt like armor, a piece of Kale's past wrapping around her. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes. He nodded, then pulled a small silver amulet from his pocket, a crescent moon etched with runes. He pressed it into her hand. "For protection," he said. "Old pack magic. It won't stop a rogue, but it'll mask your scent for a while." She closed her fingers around it, the metal warm from his touch. "And you?" she asked. "What protects you?" His gaze softened. "You do," the words stole her breath. Before she could respond, he turned to the shelves, grabbing a map and spreading it on the crate. "Here's the ravine," he said, pointing to a red X. 10 miles north through the densest part of the forest. We'll stick to the creek bed to cover our tracks." Ilara leaned over the map, her shoulder brushing his. The contact sent a jolt through her, the bond humming in her blood. She ignored it, focusing on the route. "What about Lyrian?" she asked. "Will she follow?" "She will," Cal said, his voice grim. "But she's not the worst of it. Draven's son, Torin, leads the rogues now. He's got my father's ambition and none of his honor. If he finds you—" He didn't finish, but his hand tightened on the map. Ilara's stomach knotted. "Then we don't let him." Kyle looked at her, surprise and something deeper flickering in his eyes. "You're starting to sound like a Luna," he said, his voice low. She flushed, turning back to the map. "Don't get ahead of yourself," he chuckled, the sound easing the tension in the room. They spent the next hour planning, their heads bent close, voices low. Every brush of his arm, every shared glance, deepened the thread between them, pulling tighter with every word. As the first hint of gray light seeped through the cracks around the trapdoor, Kel stood, slinging the backpack over his shoulder. "It's time," he said, offering his hand. Alara took it, her fingers curling around his. His grip was warm, steady, a lifeline in the dark. They climbed the ladder, Cale first, shotgun ready. The cabin above was a wreck, bloodstains, splintered wood, the gray wolf's body gone, dragged away by its pack. The air was heavy with their scent, but the forest outside was quiet. Cale opened the door, scanning the trees. "Clear," he whispered, pulling her into the dawn's pale light. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and the ground slick with mud. Alara's boots sank into the earth as they moved, Cale's hand never leaving hers. Behind them, the cabin stood silent, a ruined sanctuary. Ahead, the forest loomed, hiding the bunker and whatever waited beyond. Alara's heart pounded, but with Kyle beside her, the fear felt shared, not crushing. As they slipped into the trees, a faint howl rose in the distance. Not close, but close enough. Cale's grip tightened, and Alara squeezed back. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Chapter 7. The Creek Bed Path. The forest floor was a sponge of pine needles and mud, sucking at Alara's boots with every step. Dawn's light filtered through the canopy in thin silver threads, painting the world in shades of gray and muted green. Cale moved ahead of her, his stride silent despite his size, the backpack slung low on his shoulders. His hand stayed linked with hers, a tether that kept her grounded as they followed the creek bed north. The water gurgled softly, a low counterpoint to the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of waking birds. Alara's breath fogged in the chilly air, her lungs burning from the pace. The leather jacket Cale had given her, his mother's, kept the wind at bay, but nothing could ease the ache in her calves or the knot of fear in her gut. The howl from earlier still echoed in her mind, a reminder that Lyrian and her rogues were out there, tracking them. The silver amulet hung heavy against her chest, its runes warm against her skin, masking her scent, but not her dread. Cal stopped abruptly, his head tilting as he scanned the trees. His grip on her hand tightened, a silent signal to freeze. Alara held her breath, her eyes darting to the shadows. Nothing moved, but the air felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the creek's murmur. "Tracks," he said, crouching to brush his fingers over the mud. Paw prints, large, deep, with claw marks that gouged the earth. "Fresh, less than an hour old." Alara's stomach twisted. "Lyrian?" "Or Torin," Cale said, his voice grim. He stood, his eyes narrowing as he studied the path ahead. "They're flanking us, trying to cut off the ravine." She swallowed hard, the weight of the flare gun in her pocket a small comfort. "Can we outrun them?" "Not in daylight," he said, his gaze flicking to her. "But we can outsmart them. The creek bends west in a mile. There's a fallen oak, old pack marker. We'll cross there, double back through the brambles. It'll slow them down." Alara nodded, trusting his knowledge of the forest even as her nerves frayed. Cale pulled her closer, his arm brushing hers as they moved again, faster now. The bond between them pulsed, a steady thrum in her chest that grew stronger with every step. It wasn't just his touch. It was the way he glanced back to check on her, the way his body angled to shield her from the open path. He was her protector, but more than that, he was becoming her anchor. The creek widened, its banks slick with moss. Cale released her hand to help her over a cluster of rocks, his hand steady on her waist. The contact sent a spark through her, and she met his eyes, catching a flicker of something raw. Desire, maybe, or the same pull she felt. He looked away first, his jaw tight. "Careful," he said, his voice rougher than necessary. "The stones are slippery." She nodded, focusing on her footing, but her mind lingered on the warmth of his hands. The bond was a living thing now, weaving through her fear, her anger, her exhaustion. It scared her as much as it steadied her. They reached the fallen oak, its massive trunk half submerged in the creek, roots clawing at the sky. Cale knelt, running his fingers over a carving in the bark, a crescent moon bisected by a claw. "Still intact," he murmured. "Good. What does it mean?" Elara asked, crouching beside him. "Safe passage," he said. "My father's sign means the path ahead is clear of traps." He glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He was paranoid, but it kept us alive. Elara traced the carving, her fingers brushing his. "You miss him," she said softly. "Every day," Cale admitted, his voice low. "He was hard, but he loved the pack. Loved me, in his way." He paused, his eyes distant. "I've spent my life trying to be half the alpha he was, but I'm not sure I'm enough." The vulnerability in his words hit her hard. She saw the weight he carried, the pack, the rogues, the throne he'd fought for. And now her. "You're enough," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "You're here, Kyle. You're fighting for me. That's more than enough." His eyes snapped to hers, surprise and something deeper flickering in their amber depths. For a moment, neither spoke, the creek's babble filling the silence. Then he reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. "You don't know what that means to me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hearing you say that..." Alara's cheeks warmed, and she looked down, her fingers tightening around the amulet. "I'm still mad at you," she said, but there was no bite in it. "For the parking lot. For everything." "I know," he said, his hand dropping to his side. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making it right, if you let me." The promise hung between them, heavy with possibility. Elara wanted to believe it, to let the bond pull her closer, but the scars of the past held her back. She stood brushing mud from his mother's jacket. "Let's keep moving," she said, needing the distraction. Cale nodded, leading her across the oak's trunk. The wood was slick, but his hand steadied her, guiding her to the other side. They slipped into the brambles, thorns snagging at their clothes. Elara winced as one scratched her cheek, a thin line of blood welling up. Cale stopped, his thumb brushing the cut gently. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice tight. "It's fine," she said, but his nostrils flared, his eyes glowing faintly. The bond surged, and she realized he wasn't just worried. He was fighting something primal, the wolf reacting to her blood. "I'm okay," she said again, firmer, cupping his face to ground him. His stubble was rough under her palms, his breath warm against her wrist. "Stay with me, Cull." He exhaled shakily, the glow in his eyes fading. "I'm here," he said, his voice strained. "But we need to move. Blood draws them." They pushed through the brambles, the thorns tearing at Alara's jeans. Kyle took the worst of it, shielding her with his body, his jacket ripping in places. The forest grew denser, the air heavy with moss and decay. Alara's legs screamed, but she kept pace, fueled by adrenaline and the need to reach the bunker. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, its light barely penetrating the canopy. Cale stopped again, his head snapping toward a ridge to their left. "Voices," he whispered, pulling her behind a boulder. Elara strained to hear. Faint murmurs, carried on the wind, too distant to make out words, but unmistakably human. Or shifter. Cale's hand found hers, squeezing tight. "Torin's scouts," he said. "They're closer than I thought." Her heart pounded. "What do we do?" He scanned the ridge, then the creek bed. "There's a cave 1/2 mile east. Old pack hideout. We hole up until nightfall, then make a run for the bunker under cover of dark." Elara nodded, her throat dry. Cale led her off the path, moving through underbrush so thick she had to crawl in places. His hand never left hers, pulling her through when she faltered. The cave came into view, a narrow slit in a rocky outcrop, hidden by vines. Cale pushed them aside, revealing a dark, cool interior. Inside, the air was damp, the floor littered with old leaves. Cale dropped the backpack, pulling out a flashlight and sweeping the space. It was small, barely 10 feet deep but defensible. He set the shotgun by the entrance, then turned to her. "You need rest," he said, his voice soft but firm. "We've got a few hours." Alara sank against the wall, her body trembling from exhaustion. Cale sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. He pulled a water bottle from the pack, handing it to her. She drank deeply, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. "Thank you," she said, passing it back. Their fingers brushed, and the bond flared, warm and insistent. She didn't pull away. Kyle took a swig, then capped the bottle. "You're holding up better than most," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Not many humans could keep pace with a shifter." "I'm not most humans," she said, echoing his earlier words about her Omega blood. The corner of her mouth lifted, a small defiance. His smile was slow, genuine, lighting his face in the dim cave. "No, you're not," the moment stretched, charged with unspoken words. Ilara's gaze dropped to his lips, then snapped back to his eyes. The bond pulled, urging her closer, but fear held her back. Cale sensed it, his hand resting on the ground between them, not pushing. "Tell me something," she said, needing to break the tension. "Something about you. Not the Alpha. Just Cale." He leaned back, his head resting against the stone. "I used to climb the pines behind my house," he said. "When things got bad with my father, I'd go as high as I could, until the world was just treetops and sky. Felt like I could breathe up there." Alara smiled, picturing a younger Kyle, all gangly limbs and defiance. "I used to hide in my grandmother's attic," she said. "She had these old trunks full of books, myths mostly. I'd read until I fell asleep," he chuckled softly. "Nana Mira's stories. She knew more than she let on." Alara's smile faded. "She never told me about this. About me. She was keeping you safe," Cale said, his voice gentle. "The less you knew, the less you'd draw attention." A rustle outside the cave made them both tense. Cale was on his feet, shotgun in hand, his body blocking the entrance. Alara's hand went to the flare gun, her heart racing. The rustle came again, closer, deliberate. Kyle's eyes glowed in the dark, his voice a low growl. "Stay behind me." The bond surged, fear and trust intertwining. Alara stood, her shoulder against his back, ready to fight. Whatever was out there, they'd face it together. But the secret of what hunted them, and why Torin wanted her so badly, loomed larger than ever. Chapter 8. Shadows in the Hollow. The cave mouth framed a slice of gray sky, the light dimming as clouds thickened overhead. Alara's pulse thundered in her ears, the flare gun heavy in her grip. Cale stood like a sentinel at the entrance, shotgun raised, his broad shoulders filling the narrow space. The rustling outside had stopped, replaced by an unnatural stillness that pressed against her skin. The bond between them hummed, a live wire connecting her fear to his vigilance. "Stay low," Cale whispered, his voice a gravelly thread. He didn't look back, but she felt his awareness of her, a protective shield woven into every tense muscle. Alara crouched behind a jut of rock, her eyes locked on the vines draping the cave's entrance. The amulet at her throat pulsed, warm and steady, but it did nothing to ease the chill creeping up her spine. Seconds stretched into minutes, the silence broken only by the faint drip of water from the cave's ceiling. Then a shadow moved outside, swift, deliberate. Cale's finger tightened on the trigger. A low growl rumbled, not from him but from the forest, deep and guttural. Alara's breath caught as a figure stepped into view, tall, lean, with silver hair tied back and eyes like chipped ice. Lyrian. She stood just beyond the vines, a smirk curling her lips, her hands empty but her presence a threat. "Cale," she called, her voice honey over broken glass. "Hiding in holes now? How far the Alpha King has fallen?" Cale's growl was answer enough, low and lethal. "Leave, Lyrian. You're not welcome here." "Oh, but I am," she said, tilting her head. "Torin sends his regards. He's very interested in your little Omega." Her gaze flicked past Cale, locking onto Alara. "Come out, sweet thing. No need to cower." Alara's grip on the flare gun tightened, her finger hovering over the trigger. She wanted to step forward, to spit defiance, but Cale's subtle shake of his head kept her still. The bond pulsed, his warning clear. "Don't move." "You're wasting your time," Cale said, his voice steady but edged with fury. "She's under my protection." Lyrian laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "Protection? You can barely protect yourself. The pack's fracturing, Kyle. Your allies are fleeing to Torin, and when he takes the throne, your Omega will be his prize." She stepped closer, her boots silent on the damp earth. "Or maybe I'll take her first. A gift for my brother's memory." Cale's body coiled, the shotgun steady. "Touch her and you die." Lyrian's smile widened, predatory. Bold words for a king without a crown. She raised a hand, and 2 more figures emerged from the trees. Shifters, massive and scarred, their eyes glowing in the dim light. "Last chance, Cale. Hand her over and I'll let you walk away." Alara's heart pounded, but anger overrode her fear. She wasn't a bargaining chip. She stood, ignoring Cale's sharp glance, and stepped to his side, flare gun raised. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice clear despite the tremor in her hands. "Back off." Lyrian's eyes narrowed, amusement giving way to something colder. "Brave for a half-blood. But courage won't save you when the moon rises." Cale shifted, angling his body to keep Alara partially shielded. "You're outnumbered, Lyrian," he said. "Leave now, or I drop you and your dogs." The 2 shifters growled, crouching, ready to lunge. Lyrian raised a hand, stopping them. "Not yet," she said, her gaze flicking between Cale and Alara. "The full moon's tomorrow. We'll see how strong your bond is when her power wakes." She stepped back, melting into the trees. "Enjoy your cave, lovebirds. It won't hold forever." The shifters followed, their forms vanishing into the underbrush. The forest fell silent again, but the tension lingered like smoke. Cale lowered the shotgun, his shoulders sagging slightly. He turned to Alara, his eyes searching her face. "You shouldn't have shown yourself," he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only worry. "I'm done letting them talk about me like I'm not here," Alara said, her voice steadier now. She lowered the flare gun, her hands shaking. "She's not taking me, Cale. Neither is Torin." His expression softened, pride flickering in his amber eyes. "You're starting to sound like a Luna," he said, echoing his words from the safe room. This time, she didn't deflect. He set the shotgun against the wall and crossed to her, his hands hovering before settling on her shoulders. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, intimate. She nodded, but her eyes stung with unshed tears. "I'm scared," she admitted. "But I'm not running." Kyle pulled her into his arms, the movement sudden but gentle. Alara stiffened for a moment, then melted against him, her cheek pressed to his chest. His heartbeat was steady, strong, a rhythm that calmed the chaos in her own. The bond surged, warm and alive, wrapping around them both. She felt his breath in her hair, his arms a fortress against the world outside. "I've got you," he murmured, his voice rumbling through her. "Always." She clung to him, the leather jacket creaking as she buried her face in his shirt. He smelled of pine, sweat, and something uniquely Cale, wild and safe all at once. The cave's damp chill faded, replaced by the heat of him. For the first time since the attack on her car, she felt sheltered, not hunted. They stood like that for minutes, maybe hours, the world narrowing to the space between them. Ilara's hand slid up his back, tracing the hard lines of muscle, the scars she couldn't see but could feel. He shivered under her touch, his grip tightening. "Ilara," he said, her name a plea. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "I need to tell you something," her heart stuttered. "What?" He hesitated, his thumb brushing her cheek, smearing a streak of dirt. "The bond. It's not just about power or the pack. It's you. It's always been you. Even when I pushed you away, I felt it. I was too young, too stupid to understand." His voice cracked. "I don't deserve your trust, but I'm begging for it anyway." Ilara's throat tightened. The boy who'd rejected her was gone, replaced by this man who bared his soul in a cave with death circling outside. She saw the truth in his eyes, felt it in the bond that pulsed between them. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said, her voice soft but honest. "But I'm starting to believe you." His smile was small, fragile, but it lit the darkness. "That's enough," he said. "For now." He released her, stepping back to give her space, but the bond kept them tethered, a thread that refused to break. Kyle moved to the backpack, pulling out a small tin of jerky and handing her a piece. "Eat," he said. "We need strength for tonight." Alara took it, their fingers brushing. They sat against the cave wall, shoulders touching, sharing the meager meal in silence. The simplicity of it, eating, breathing, existing together, felt profound after the chaos. She studied him as he chewed, the way his brow furrowed when he thought, the way his eyes flicked to the entrance every few seconds, always on guard. "Tell me about your mother," she said, needing to know more, to peel back the layers of the man beside her. Kale's gaze softened. "She was human," he said, surprising her. "My father found her in a town like Blackthorn Hollow. She was a nurse, stubborn as hell, didn't care that he was a shifter, didn't care about the dangers. She loved him anyway." He smiled faintly. "She taught me how to be human, even when the wolf wanted to take over." Alara's heart ached for the boy who'd lost both parents. "She'd be proud of you," she said. He shook his head. "I'm not so sure. I've made mistakes. Too many." "You're trying to fix them," she said, her hand resting on his arm. "That matters." He looked at her, his eyes searching. "You make me want to be better," he said, the words raw. "Not for the pack. For you." The bond flared, pulling her closer. She leaned into him, her head against his shoulder. He stiffened, then relaxed, his arm wrapping around her. They sat like that, the cave a cocoon against the world, as the day bled into dusk. Outside, the forest stirred again. A faint snap of a twig, a whisper of movement. Kale's head snapped up, his body tensing. "They're back," he said, standing and grabbing the shotgun. "We move now." Alara rose, the flare gun ready, her heart steady despite the fear. Kale handed her the backpack, his eyes locking onto hers. "Stay close," he said. "No matter what." She nodded, the bond a lifeline between them. They slipped out of the cave into the deepening twilight, the ravine and the bunker their only hope. But as they moved, a new sound cut through the trees, a low rhythmic chanting, ancient and eerie, carried on the wind. Alara's blood ran cold. Whatever Torin and Lyrian were planning, it was bigger than a hunt, and the full moon was only hours away. Chapter 9. The Moon's Whisper. Twilight bled into the ravine, painting the jagged stone walls in hues of violet and ash. Alara's boots slipped on loose gravel as she followed Kale down the narrow path, the backpack digging into her shoulders. The air was thick with the scent of wet rock and pine, and the distant chanting grew louder, a low, rhythmic pulse that seemed to vibrate in her bones. It wasn't just sound. It was a summons, tugging at something deep inside her, something that felt both foreign and familiar. Kale moved ahead, his silhouette sharp against the fading light, shotgun slung over one shoulder. His hand reached back for hers, a silent reassurance, and Alara took it, her fingers curling around his calloused palm. The bond thrummed between them, stronger now, a steady heartbeat that drowned out the fear clawing at her chest. His touch was warm, grounding, but the chanting made her skin prickle, as if the forest itself was watching. "What is that sound?" she asked, her voice low, barely carrying over the crunch of their steps. Kale's grip tightened. "Old magic," he said, his tone grim. "Torin's calling the blood rites, trying to force your awakening before the full moon." He glanced back, his amber eyes catching the last of the light. "He wants your power unbound, under his control." Alara's stomach twisted. "Can he do that?" "Not if we reach the bunker," Kale said. But there was a flicker of doubt in his voice, quickly masked. "The wards there are ancient. They'll hold against his spells," she nodded, focusing on the path, but the chanting burrowed deeper, stirring images she couldn't place, flashes of moonlight on fur, a circle of wolves, her own hands stained with blood. She shook her head, pushing the visions away. The amulet at her throat burned, its warmth almost painful now, as if fighting the pull of the rite. The ravine narrowed, the walls closing in until they were forced to move single file. Kale went first, his body shielding her from the open side where the drop was sheer. Alara's breath hitched as a pebble skittered under her foot, tumbling into the void. Cale's hand shot back, steadying her. "Easy," he murmured, his voice soft but urgent. "I've got you." She clung to his hand, her heart racing. "I know," she said, and meant it. The bond was more than instinct now. It was trust, hard-won and fragile, but growing with every step. They rounded a bend, and the bunker came into view. A squat, stone structure half carved into the cliff, its iron door rusted but intact. Vines clung to the walls and runes glowed faintly along the frame, pulsing in time with the chanting. Cale stopped, his head tilting as he studied the door. "Wards are still active," he said, relief threading his voice. "But they're weakening. Torrens closer than I thought." Alara's eyes darted to the ridge above. Shadows moved, too many, too fast. "Kyle," she whispered, her voice tight. He followed her gaze, his jaw clenching. "Inside, now." He pulled a key from his pocket, old and heavy, and jammed it into the lock. The door groaned open, revealing a dark, cavernous interior. Alara slipped past him, the flare gun raised, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and old blood. Cale followed, heaving the door shut and sliding a thick iron bar across it. The runes flared brighter, then dimmed, as if acknowledging their presence. The bunker was larger than the cave, with stone benches, a fire pit, and shelves lined with supplies, canned food, blankets, a few weapons. A single lantern hung from the ceiling, its glass cracked but functional. Cale lit it with a match from the backpack, the flame casting flickering shadows across the walls. "We're safe for now," he said, setting the shotgun down and turning to her. "The wards will hold until the moon crests tomorrow night." Alara lowered the flare gun, her hands trembling. "And then?" Cale's eyes met hers, steady but shadowed. "Then you awaken, and we face whatever comes." She sank onto a bench, the weight of the day crashing over her. Kyle knelt before her, his hands gentle as he checked the scratch on her cheek from the brambles. His touch was careful, almost reverent, and it sent a warmth through her that battled the chill of the bunker. "You're bleeding again," he said, his voice low. He pulled a cloth from the backpack, dampening it with water and dabbing at the cut. "Your scent, it's stronger now. The amulet's failing." Alara's hand went to the silver crescent, its heat almost scorching. "Why?" she asked, her voice small. "The rite," he said, his eyes darkening. "It's waking your blood. The Omega in you is fighting to surface." He paused, his hand lingering on her cheek. "You feel it, don't you?" She did. The chanting wasn't just outside, it was inside her. A pull that made her skin hum, her heart race. Visions flashed again. A circle of wolves, a throne of bone. Cale's eyes glowing gold as he reached for her. She gasped, pulling back, her hands clutching the bench. "Alara?" Cale's voice was sharp with worry. He cupped her face, grounding her. "Stay with me." "I'm okay," she said, but her voice shook. It's like something's trying to claw its way out." He nodded, his expression grim. "That's the awakening. It's early, but Torrens forcing it." He stood, pacing the small space, his hands clenched. "I should have known he'd try this. I should have gotten you farther away." "Stop," Alara said, standing and grabbing his arm. "You can't blame yourself for everything. You're here, Kyle. You're keeping me alive." He turned to her, his eyes raw. "I'm not enough," he said, the words tearing from him. "Not against Torrin, not against the pack. I rejected you once, and now I'm dragging you into a war I can't win." Alara's heart ached at the pain in his voice. She stepped closer, her hands framing his face, forcing him to meet her gaze. "You're not dragging me anywhere," she said fiercely. "I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you." His breath hitched, and for a moment he was still, his eyes searching hers. Then he pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her like she was his lifeline. Alara buried her face in his chest, the bond surging, a tidal wave of emotion that drowned her doubts. His heartbeat was her anchor, his warmth her shield. "I don't deserve you," he murmured into her hair, his voice breaking. but I can't let you go." "Then don't," she whispered, her hands clutching his shirt. "I'm not asking you to be perfect, Kyle. I'm asking you to be here." He pulled back, his eyes glowing faintly, the wolf close to the surface. "I'm here," he said, his voice rough with promise. "Always." The moment stretched, charged with unspoken need. Alara's gaze dropped to his lips, her pulse racing. The bond pulled, urging her closer. But she hesitated, the weight of the past still a shadow between them. Cale sensed it, his hand brushing her cheek, gentle but restrained. "We should rest," he said, stepping back, giving her space. "Tomorrow's going to be brutal." She nodded, disappointment and relief warring in her chest. Cale spread a blanket on the bench, gesturing for her to lie down. She did, the stone cold beneath her, but he sat beside her, his presence a warmth that chased away the chill. He pulled another blanket over her, his fingers lingering on her shoulder. "Sleep," he said, his voice soft. "I'll keep watch." Alara's eyes grew heavy, the chanting a distant hum now, muffled by the bunker's wards. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers with his. "Stay close," she murmured, echoing his words from the cave. He squeezed her hand, settling against the bench, his body a shield between her and the door. "Always," he said again, the word a vow. As sleep pulled her under, the bond wove tighter, a thread of light in the darkness. But outside, the chanting grew louder, the runes on the door flickering erratically. A crack appeared in the stone wall, thin but growing, and the scent of blood and magic seeped through. Cale's head snapped up, his eyes glowing in the dark, the wolf stirring. Something was coming. Something older than Torin. Older than the pack. And as the moon climbed higher, Alara's dreams turned to fire and claws, a warning of the power waking within her. Chapter 10, The Rite of Fractured Moon. The bunker's lantern sputtered, its flame dancing like a trapped moth. Alara jolted awake, her heart pounding from dreams of blood-soaked altars and a moon that bled silver. The chanting outside had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against the stone walls. Cale's hand was still in hers, his grip tight even in sleep, his body curled protectively around her on the narrow bench. His breath was warm against her neck, steady but shallow, as if even unconscious he stood guard. She shifted, careful not to wake him, and studied his face in the dim light. The scar on his brow was stark, a reminder of the boy he'd been and the man he'd become. His lashes cast shadows on his cheeks, and a faint bruise lingered where the gray wolf had struck him. The bond hummed, a quiet song in her chest, urging her to trace the line of his jaw, to memorize the curve of his lips. She resisted, but her fingers tightened around his. A low rumble shook the bunker, dust sifting from the ceiling. Alara froze, her eyes darting to the iron door. The runes glowed erratically, flickering like a dying heartbeat. Another rumble, deeper, and the crack in the wall widened, a jagged line spidering upward. Cale's eyes snapped open, gold and glowing, his body tensing as he pulled her closer. "They're here," he growled, his voice rough with sleep and fury. He was on his feet in an instant, shotgun in hand, his other arm keeping her behind him. "The wards are failing." Alara stood, the flare gun heavy in her pocket, her pulse racing. "Torin?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "Worse," Kyle said, his gaze fixed on the door. "The rite's complete. He's called the Old Ones." Her blood ran cold. "Old Ones?" Cale's jaw clenched. "Spirits of the first pack, bound to the Voss bloodline. Torin's trying to wake them through you." He turned to her, his eyes fierce. "If they take you, Alara, they'll use your power to unmake the pack, and me." The door shuddered, the iron bar bending under an unseen force. Alara's hand went to the amulet, its heat searing now, the runes pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Visions flooded her, wolves with eyes like stars, a woman with her face crowned in moonlight, Kyle kneeling in chains. She gasped, stumbling back, and Kyle caught her, his hands steady on her arms. "Stay with me," he said, his voice cutting through the haze. "You're stronger than this." "I don't feel strong," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I feel like I'm coming apart," He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "You're not," he said, his voice fierce. "You're the anchor, Alara, the heart of this. I've seen it, in the way you faced Lyrian, in the way you keep fighting. You're my Luna, whether you claim it or not." The words hit her like a spark, igniting something deep inside. The bond surged, a wave of warmth that pushed back the visions, the fear. She leaned into his touch, her hands covering his. "I'm not ready," she whispered, "but I'm not giving up." Cale's eyes softened, pride and love flickering in their depths. "That's my girl," he said, the words a vow. He pressed his forehead to hers, a fleeting moment of peace amid the chaos. "We'll face this together." The door groaned, the bar snapping with a sound like a gunshot. Cale spun, shoving Alara behind a stone pillar. "Stay down," he growled, raising the shotgun. The runes flared one last time, then died, plunging the bunker into shadow. The door exploded inward, shards of iron flying. Lyrian stepped through, her silver hair glowing in the lantern's faint light, her eyes icy and triumphant. Behind her, Torin loomed, a mountain of a man, broader than Cale, with a face carved from cruelty and scars. His eyes were black, void-like, and they locked onto Alara with a hunger that made her skin crawl. "Time's up, Alpha," Torin said, his voice a low thunder. "The Omega's mine." Cale's growl was primal, the wolf surging to the surface. "Over my corpse," he snarled, firing the shotgun. The blast echoed, but Torin moved faster than humanly possible, sidestepping as the pellets tore into the wall. Lyrian laughed, raising a hand. Shadows coalesced around her, forming spectral wolves, translucent, glowing, their howls silent but deafening in Alara's mind. The old ones. They circled Kyle, their forms flickering, claws raking the air. Alara's heart pounded, the amulet burning against her skin. The visions returned, stronger now. A circle of stones, a throne of antlers, her own voice chanting in a language she didn't know. The power inside her stirred, clawing to be free. She gripped the pillar, her nails digging into stone, fighting to stay grounded. Cale fought like a storm, his body blurring as he shifted partially, claws extending, eyes blazing gold. He tore through one spectral wolf, but two more took its place, their forms reforming. Torin advanced, a blade in his hand, its edge glowing with the same runes as the door. "You're weak, Cale," Torin said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Your father would be ashamed," Cale roared, lunging at Torin, but Lyrian's shadows coiled around his legs, dragging him down. Alara's breath caught as he hit the floor, the shotgun skidding out of reach. Torin raised the blade, aiming for Cale's heart. No! Alara's scream tore from her throat, raw and desperate. The amulet shattered, silver fragments flying. Power surged through her, a tidal wave of heat and light that burst from her core. The spectral wolves howled, their forms wavering, and Torin staggered, shielding his eyes. Alara stepped forward, her hands glowing with moonlight, her voice not her own. "You will not touch him," she said, the words echoing with ancient authority. The bunker trembled, stones cracking, and the shadows recoiled. Kyle's eyes widened, awe and fear mingling as he looked at her. "Alara," he breathed, scrambling to his feet. Torin recovered, his blade still raised. "The Omega awakens," he snarled, lunging for her. Cale intercepted, tackling Torin with a force that shook the floor. They grappled, claws and fists flying, blood spraying. Lyrian's shadows surged toward Alara, but she raised her hands, instinct guiding her. Light poured from her palms, banishing the specters, their howls fading into silence. "Enough." Alara's voice boomed, the power within her peaking. The bunker's walls glowed, runes reigniting, stronger now, fueled by her blood. Torin and Lyrian were thrown back, slamming against the far wall. The iron door slammed shut, sealing with a deafening clang. Silence fell, broken only by Cale's ragged breathing. He staggered to Alara, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching hers. "You did it," he said, his voice raw with wonder. "You're magnificent." Alara's knees buckled, the power ebbing, leaving her drained. Cale caught her, pulling her against him, his arms a fortress. "I felt it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The old ones, they're part of me," You're their vessel, Kale said, his voice soft but fierce. But you're still you, my Alara. She clung to him, the bond a lifeline as the world spun. The bunker was secure, the wards blazing, but the cost was clear. Her awakening had come early, and Torin knew her power now. The full moon was hours away, and the war for the pack had only begun. Kale carried her to the bench, laying her down gently. He brushed her hair from her face, his touch reverent. Rest, he said. I'll keep watch. She caught his hand, her eyes heavy but determined. We do this together, she said, echoing his words. No more secrets. He nodded, his smile small but unbreakable. No more secrets, he promised. Outside, the moon climbed higher, its light seeping through the cracks, calling to the power within her. Alara closed her eyes, Kale's hand in hers, the bond a beacon in the dark. But as sleep claimed her, a final vision lingered, a throne of bone, a crown of claws, and Kale's blood on her hands. The old ones weren't done with her yet.